Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of Uthman ibn Affan's life and times. We are in part 4, Conquests in the era of Uthman. Let us begin. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Alright. Buckle up, buttercup. The death of Umar ibn al-Khattab encouraged the enemies of Islam, especially those in Persia and Byzantium, to attempt to reconquer the land they had lost to the Muslims. The king of Persia, Yazdigerd, began to make plans in Fergana, the capital of Samarkand, where he resided. The Byzantine leaders left Syria and moved to Constantinople, the capital of Byzantium. The remainder of the Byzantine army was located in Alexandria, Egypt, where they had been entrenched in the era of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Amr ibn al-As sought permission from Uthman to conquer it, though it was well fortified with catapults on its walls. Heraclius was determined to fight in this battle himself, and not one Byzantine soldier was going to lag behind, for Alexandria was their last stronghold. Amr bin al-As. Consequently, the Byzantines of Alexandria assembled, and they began looking for ways to reclaim their past rule over it. This led them to break their peace treaty with the Muslims, in which they had been helped by the Byzantine navy, which had sent them 300 ships, all carrying men and weapons. Uthman faced this challenge in a determined and resolute manner, as illustrated by the following actions. 1. Subduing the Persian and Byzantine rebels and restoring the Islamic rule in these lands. 2. Continuing the jihad and conquest in other lands in order to cut any aid coming from them. So cutting aid, reestablishing military bases where the Muslims stayed in order to guard the lands of Islam. So, military bases. Establishing a naval force because the army direly needed it. So, the navy. The main military bases and the stronghold of the Muslim army in the time of Uthman were the capitals of the major areas. The bases of Iraq were Kufa and Basra. The base of Syria, after it had fallen completely under Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, was Damascus. The base of Egypt was Fustat. These bases protected the Muslim state and continued the conquests and spread Islam. So we have Fusi. So in Iraq and Syria and Egypt, there are bases. Chapter 11, Uthman's conquests in the east. Conquest from Kufa, Azerbaijan in 24 AH. The people of Kufa invaded Ray and Azerbaijan with 10,000 soldiers guarding them, 6,000 in Azerbaijan and 4,000 in Ray. The army of Kufa comprised 40,000 soldiers, of which 4,000 joined the force every year. This means that everyone had to partake in military activity every 4 years. When Uthman handed Kufa to Al-Walid ibn Uqba, the people of Azerbaijan broke their treaty. They refused to pay what they had promised to Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman during the time of Umar in return for peace. Instead, they rebelled against their governor, Uqba ibn Farqad. So we got some names here. So we have Al-Walid, bin Uqba. Then we have Hudayfa bin al-Yaman. And then Uqba bin Farqad. Consequently, Uthman commanded Al-Walid to fight them. He prepared his commander, Salman bin Rabia al-Bahili, and sent him ahead with a group of soldiers. Then he followed with a group of people. The people of Azerbaijan hurried to him, requesting that he make peace with them for the amount on which they had agreed with Hudayfa in the past. Al-Walid agreed and took their pledges, after which he sent the units to raid the surrounding areas. He sent Abdullah ibn Shubayl al-Ahmasi with 4,000 troops to the people of Mukhan, the Berbers, and Taylasan, the Berbers. Okay, so Salman bin Rabia al-Bahili and Abdullah, that's a hard one to spell, Abdullah bin Shubayl al-Ahmasi. He took some spoils and prisoners, but they managed to flee. After this, he sent Salman al-Bahili with 12,000 men to Armenia. He subdued them in return with abundant spoils. After that, Al-Walid went back to Kufa. The people of Azerbaijan rebelled more than once, though, hence the governor Al-Ash'ath ibn Qais wrote to Al-Walid ibn Uqba, who sent him an army from Kufa. Al-Ash'ath pursued the rebels, which resulted in their utter defeat. They sought a treaty, and he agreed on terms from their first contract. Fearing that they would rebel once more, he appointed Arab guards to prevent this and to invite people to Islam, fixing their salaries and recording their names in the account book. So, this makes me think of the hadiths that talk about not rebelling against the rulers. That you should, really be mindful of that, because here you can see how these rebellions just really disrupt the economy. When Sa'id ibn al-As became the governor, these people returned to their old habits and rebelled against him. He sent Jarir ibn Abdullah al-Bajali, who ended up defeating them and killing their leader. The situation became stable after most of its people embraced Islam and learned the Quran. Uthman ordered Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, the governor of Kufa, to send an army to the people of Ray, who had proven to be rebellious. In response, he sent Qurayda bin Kab al-Ansari, who reclaimed it for the Muslims. We've got so many names here, isn't that wonderful? Help from Kufa to prevent the Byzantine preparations. Once Al-Walid ibn Uqba had finished his job in Azerbaijan and returned to Mosul, he received a letter from Caliph Uthman which read, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan has written to me and informed me that the Byzantines have prepared a great army in order to wage a war against the Muslims. I have decided that their brothers from Kufa should help them. Therefore, when this reaches you, send 8, 9, or 10,000 men under a man with whose aid, intrepidness, bravery, and Islam you are satisfied. Peace be with you. Look at that. So he mentions whose Islam you are satisfied with. So, intrepidness, bravery. So, the values listed are aid, intrepidness, bravery, and religion. Religion slash deen slash iman. Al-Walid arose to speak to the people. After praising Allah, he said, O people, Allah has truly given something wonderful to the Muslims of this area by returning them to their lands whose residents had apostatized, opening new lands that had not yet been conquered, and bringing them back unharmed with spoils and a great reward. All praise is for Allah, the Lord of the worlds. The commander of the faithful has written to me, ordering me to gather 8,000 to 10,000 men from amongst you who will go and help your brothers in Syria against the Byzantine army, who is preparing to fight them. In this is a great reward and lofty virtue. So sign up. May Allah have mercy on you. With Salman ibn Rabi'a al-Bahili. MashaAllah. That's a lot of men. That's a lot of people. People began to sign up. It was less than 3 days before an army of 8,000 men walked out of Kufa. They marched until they entered the Byzantine land with the army of Syria. Habib ibn Maslama ibn Khalid al-Fihri led the Syrian troops, while Salman ibn Rabi'a al-Bahili led the army to Kufa. They raided the Byzantine lands, taking as many prisoners and as much booty as they could. They also opened numerous strongholds for the Muslims. So opening strongholds, taking captives, raids. A narrator states the following about the jihad and expeditions of Al-Walid. I saw Ash-Shabi sitting with Muhammad ibn Amr bin Al-Walid ibn Uqbah. Muhammad mentioned the expedition of Muslima ibn Abdul Malik, and Ash-Shabi said, If only you had seen Al-Walid and his expeditions and rule. He used to carry out expeditions and conquests until he had reached such and such a place. He never fell short in this, and nobody accused him of that until he was dismissed. So you can just see the thoroughness and the loyalty. Sayyid ibn al-As and the invasion of Tabaristan in 30 AH. In 30 AH, Sayyid ibn al-As sent out with his troops from Kufa, headed for Khorasan. So such a cool name. So Kufa, Khorasan. That'd be like a cool name for your son. You're like a very cool horse. Khorasan. He was accompanied by Hurayfa ibn al-Yaman and some other companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-Hasan and Al-Hussein were there, as well as Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, and Abdullah ibn Azubair. Hey, all these names are familiar, isn't that great? Isn't it wonderful when you start to really recognize names? At the same time, so they are setting out from Kufa, headed to Khorasan. At the same time, Abdullah ibn Amr had set out from Basra. He reached Khorasan before Sa'id did, and he went to Abrashur. When Sa'id heard that Abdullah ibn Amr had gone to Abrashur, he went to Qawmais, whose people had made a treaty with Hurayfa after Nahavand. He then arrived in Gorgan, whose people made peace with him for 200,000 dirhams. After that, he went to Tamisa, which was part of Tabaristan. Gorgan, a city on the coast of the borders of Gorgan. Where is that? I've never heard of this place, Gorgan. Its people fought against him. Said asked Hudayfa how Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, had prayed the prayer of peril. The prayer of peril with the weapons. Remember? One line watches the back of the front row, right? I remember this one. So they would rotate. Someone standing with weapons, keeping watch. They're like right behind and in front. There's people doing their prostrations and whatnot. You get up, you switch and you watch what they want. They do it. And he prayed it as he was instructed while fighting was going on. That day, Said struck a man on the shoulder, such that his sword came out from under his elbow. Look at that. So, when he besieged them, they asked for safety. He promised that he would not kill a man from them. When they opened the fortress, he went inside and killed them all, except the man he had promised to spare. The Muslim army took everything that was inside the fortress. When Said returned to Kufa, Ka'b ibn Juwayl praised him, saying, "A great youth he was when Gilan wandered to him. When they came forth from Dastaba and Abhara, no, Said of goodness, should my mount kneel down, then surely I would hate for it to be slaughtered. You were a lion of the den on the day of the trail, who left the lions of the jungle and came to the desert, leading what none before you has ever led, 80,000 men with and without an army." Cool. So like war poems, war praise poems, battle poems. Okay, so notice it said he told that he was not gonna murk anybody. It's kind of mean that he lied. You see that, it's warrior's deception. Like, lay down your arms and we won't hurt anybody. Kind of reminds me of when Jaime Lannister was at Riverrun trying to take the castle of the Blackfish. And how they didn't hurt anyone, they just took down the banners and they only wanted to but then when the Greyjoys are holding Moat Cailin, I think it is, and then Theon says that Ramsay will just let those guys go if they hand over who they need to hand over, and then those people say, the guy says no. Another guy puts a sword in his head because they're starving and stuff. I'm like, does this paper say, we can leave or whatever? And then Theon's like, yes. But then actually Ramsay flays them. So you see a little bit of that even in fiction. Instead of actually letting them go, he flayed them. So you can see examples in history and in fiction where the people, if they did surrender, they were not harmed. And other times, if they did surrender, they were harmed. So it's never easy to tell. Yazdegerd, the king of Persia, flees to Khorasan. Ibn Amir came to Basra for the first and then went on to Persia, which he conquered. In 30 AH, Yazdegerd fled from Wujuz, which was in Ardashir Qura. Amir sent Mujashi ibn Masud as-Sulami to pursue him. He followed him to Kerman and entered Shirjan with his troops. Yazdegerd continued his flight to Khorasan. He was killed in 31 AH, though there are conflicting reports about the factors leading to his death. When I was reading Tabari, you see a lot of the leaders, they do try to flee. It's not every leader does the sort of go down with the ship approach. They want to preserve their life. But then I also noticed that they're pursued. I remember in that movie about Alexander the Great with Colin Farrell, I think his name was, and Angelina Jolie, where they kept pursuing. And at first I didn't understand that. Like, he's gone, let him go off into the desert. But then it is true that, like, as long as that person remains alive, hope remains alive. So I think I get it when they're like, you can't just let them go. They have to be defeated in order to defeat the idea they carry. The conquests of Abdullah ibn Amir in 31 AH. During this year, Abdullah ibn Amir went to Khorasan, where he conquered Abrashurtos, Beward, and Nisa. When he got to Sarkas, he made a treaty there with the people of Merv. People of Merv. The expedition of Bab and Balanjar in 32 AH. Uthman ibn Affan wrote to Sa'id ibn al-As and instructed him to send Salman in order to invade Bab. To Abdurrahman ibn Rabi'a, who was the commander in Bab. So, who's the commander? Abdurrahman ibn Rabi'a. Bab. Repletion has made fighting heavy on many of our people, so slow down and do not expose the Muslims to danger, for I am afraid that there will be trouble for them. So don't expose the... You can see a lot of caring about the Ummah. You notice that the people of the past, they're like, don't expose Muslims to danger. There's not a bunch of sectarian stuff as much, it feels like. It's more of the general term of the Muslims, which is really quite nice. This did not discourage Abdur Rahman from his goal, though, and he did not leave Balanjar alone. He set out in the 9th year of Uthman's caliphate. Once they had reached Balanjar, they besieged it and set up catapults and other similar war machines around it. So, Abdur Rahman is heading out, going to Balanjar. Once they got there, they're going to do a nice siege. Okay, catapults. That must have been terrifying. I couldn't imagine being inside a fortress and just seeing these contraptions that are going to launch flaming tar dung balls and stones and whatever else. You know, you could feel decapitated heads and guts all up in them catapults to launch into there. So if you notice, this is like the age of fortresses. Siege warfare and fortresses. Totally different type of style we have now today. But it's fascinating how war has changed, you know. Anyone who came close was either hurt or killed, and people fled. One day, the Turks managed to injure some Muslims. After that, the soldiers of Balanjar came out with the Turks to fight the Muslims. Abdurrahman ibn Rabi'a, who used to be called the possessor of light, was martyred. Oh, so he was called the possessor of lights. Uthman was called the possessor of two lights because he married two of the daughters of the Prophet, peace be upon him. When the first one died, then he married the second, and then she died. And the Muslims dispersed. Those who took the path of Salman ibn Rabi'a were protected by him until he departed Bab. Those who took the path of Khazar invaded Gilan and Gorgan. Gilan, Gorgan. Among them were Salman al-Farisi and Abu Huraira. Hey, Abu Huraira. People took Abdur Rahman's body and placed it in a casket. It remains with them to date. So he's buried there? That's cool if you can kind of see it and be like, whoa. It would be cool if you could go on a large tour and see all these historical spots where all these skirmishes and battles took place. Patience, O people of Salman. Another narration states that when Abdur Rahman was martyred, his brother Salman ibn Rabi al-Bahili took the flag and fought with it. someone called out, "Patience, O people of Salman." He replied, "Why? Do you see anxiety?" Then Salman, accompanied by Abu Huraira ad-Dawsi, went to Gilan and passed through it to Gorgan. He withdrew from the lost battle after burying his brother Abdur Rahman in the outskirts of Balanjar. Outskirts of Balanjar. By withdrawing like this, Salman was able to save what was left of his brother's army. Mahmud Sheet Katab accepts this narration as the most valid one, stating, "Withdrawing was closer to the fighting style of the Muslims at that particular time, and was resorted to under high enemy pressure and heavy losses. The purpose behind it was to join another group of Muslims and together launch a counterattack on the enemy. Salman ibn Rabi'a came to aid Abdur Rahman on the orders of Uthman ibn Affan, as there would have been no point in leaving his backup in Bab. Likewise, it would have been senseless for Abdur Rahman to let his brother stay there while he was engaged in a vicious battle in direly needed fighters. How could it be then that Abdur Rahman left a whole army led by his own brother without benefiting from them in battle? His two brothers, huh? Abdur Rahman. Must have been very difficult for him to, lose each other. So Salman and Abdur Rahman. Okay, so brothers. Salman and Abdur Rahman. The ancient historians would use the word hazima, which is commonly translated as defeat or fleeing, while it actually indicates withdrawal. So the difference between defeation, fleeing, withdrawing, I remember a strategical retreat, the term strategical retreat. Since most of them were townsmen, they did not distinguish between the hazima, that means abandoning the battlefield in an unordered fashion without a leader, which is something catastrophic, and inshihab, withdrawing. Okay, so notice here the different word. Okay, which is organized abandonment of the battlefield under one leader. So the difference between how one retreats, order versus chaos. Therefore, withdrawal is just another phase in the battle, the aim of which is to strike back at the enemy after reinforcing the troops. So, regrouping, reinforcements. The traditionalist historians should not commit the same mistakes regarding this term, and should distinguish between the words hazima and inshihab, as there truly is considerable differences between them. So, hazima versus inshihab. So, tactic, order. The first dispute between the peoples of Kufa and Syria in 32 AH. When Abdur Rahman ibn Rabi'a was killed, Sa'id ibn al-As appointed Salman ibn Rabi'a to command that division. So, Abdur Rahman ibn Rabi'a is martyred. Sa'id ibn al-As is now going to appoint Salman ibn Rabi'a to command that division, Oh, yeah, see? The two bros. Okay, I'm gonna write it again. Brothers. Because I can... Abdul Rahman. I'm gonna write it twice because you can get it confused. Because they both got the same last name, you know? Obviously. And Uthman aided them with the people of Syria, who were led by... So the people of Syria, led by Habib ibn Maslama. Habib and Salman disputed over who would assume the position of the commander. The people of Syria said, "We are very close to hitting Salman." Hearing this, others said, "Should that happen, we will strike Habib and imprison him. And if you resist, many will die from both sides." Aus ibn Magra from the people of Kufa said regarding that, "If you strike our Salman, we will strike your Habib. And if you go to Ibn Affan, we will go as well. But if you're just, the borders are those of our leader. He comes from these cavalries, as you can tell. Under us are the borders as we used to protect them. The nights we shot at every crucial spot and repelled." The Muslims managed to resolve the dispute by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and people like Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, who had joined the expedition with the people of Kufa. Conquest of Ibn Amr in 32 AH. Throughout this year, Ibn Amr conquered Mar al-Rud, Talokan, Faryab, Jawzan, and Takharistan. Ibn Amr. And then don't forget the other one here, Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman. The defeat of Karin in Khorasan. When Ibn Amr returned from the expedition, he appointed Qais ibn al-Haytham as the governor of Khorasan. Then Karin came forward with an army of 40,000. Abdullah ibn Kazim as-Sulaimi confronted them with 4,000 men, of which 600 were put at the front. Each was told to set alight the head of his spear. Ooh. Well, kind of like when the Dothraki are charging against the Night King's army, and they light up their things. It looks pretty intimidating. And then they charge. That's scary. At midnight, they proceeded to the enemy camp and took them by surprise. They began fighting the troops at the front. Once they were occupied with this, Abdullah ibn Kazim surrounded them with the rest of the army. The polytheists fled, chased by the Muslims, who killed whomever they could. One of those whom they killed was Karin. The Muslims also took many prisoners and collected abundant spoils. Okay, so Karin was a polytheist. Loses. So case of So Karin, he's got 40,000 men, and Abdullah ibn Kazim Sulami, he comes with 4,000. So he surround. Okay, so victory. From, I'm gonna write his name. So we'll just say, we should actually just write out the whole name. Abdullah ibn Kazim as-Sulami. Battle tested, helped defeat some polytheists by the permission of Allah. Abdullah ibn Kazim sent news of victory to Ibn Amir, who was pleased and appointed him as governor of Khorasan. So you win, you get that promotion. Go get you a promotion. aforementioned few pages detailed the way our rightly guided Caliph Uthman confronted the rebellious movements in the east and continued his conquests. These upheavals did not weaken the Muslims or affect the determination of their Caliph. Rather, he was fully able to deal with them, facing problems with resolute wisdom. So, resolute wisdom. So, to be resolute is to have a lot of assuredness, firmness in your decision making. I remember in Shakespeare's Macbeth is told to be resolute. Except you can kind of say that he didn't really, he didn't have wisdom, but he was resolute. That's why the caveat here, resolute wisdom, is important. Because if you're resolute in ignorance, well, that ain't very good, is it? Quick execution and facilitation of aid whenever needed. So, quick execution, facilitation of aid. There is no doubt that Uthman made the right choice in handing leadership to the commanders who achieved the victories and suppressed the uprisings. So, suppressed uprisings. This was despite the fact that the task of jihad was greater and heavier than ever before. It was also more dependent on correct strategies as the battle ranged far and wide in the face of turmoil. So, correct strategies. Uthman handled the unexpected difficulties that arose during his caliphate in a determined, sound, and swift manner, practicing cautiousness and deliberation. This only proves that he had a strong personality and deep insight. So we can say some values of leadership, values here that are present. So, cautiousness. So you're cautious. Determination. The ability to deliberate effectively. And then insight. We can also write penetrative insight. So it's not just you have insight, but also a penetrative one because it's a deep. Strong personality. So not wishy-washy. After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he deserves the most credit for returning to the Islamic State the revered status that it had lost after being shaken and weakened by the murder of Umar. So, revered status. In short, the glorious actions of Uthman bore the following fruits. The rebels were subdued and authority was returned to the Muslims. Conquests were extended beyond the rebellious lands, lest the rebels should flee to them and stir up trouble from there. Permanent military bases were set up where the Muslims would be stationed to guard the newly conquered lands. This is interesting because military base empires. It's American strategy we do today, where you put bases everywhere and they're able to network. So here we see that the Muslims in the past had that effective strategy as well, which has lots of utility. Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais, one of the leaders of the conquests in the east. Al-Ahnaf was among those who led the conquests during the time of Uthman. He had a distinguished way of commanding the troops that performed these conquests in the east. He also had the ability to plan effective strategies and to make quick yet appropriate decisions. His own bravery and activity also played an important role in implementing these strategies and orders. So, implementation of strategies. Implementation of strategies. Because it's not enough to come up just with the strategy, but then you got no way of executing it. Implementation, execution of strategies. Execution of orders. Execution of orders. He would do his utmost in planning his strategy and consulting the experience. Consulting the experienced. Not just thinking you can do it all by yourself, but making sure you get the best counsel you can get access to. To the extent that he would secretly walk among his men at night and listen to their discussions. Now that is totally cool. That's brilliant. So, let's write his name. Al-Ahnaf ibn Qays. So his strategy was to make sure that he implemented and carried out strategies and orders effectively. And he was brave, and he also cared about what his men thought. If he heard a good idea, he implemented it. He did not mind paying heed to wisdom no matter where he found it. This military commander fought the enemy physically and psychologically. His bravery and courage were so commendable that he would endanger himself instead of his men, preferring that they remain safe and sound. He was also very smart, which saved his men from a lot of trouble and hardship. MashaAllah. So, a biography of Al-Ahnaf ibn Qays would be quite beneficial. Never heard of him before. So, he was someone who led conquest during the time of Uthman, Allah be pleased with both of them. And he was distinguished among how he was among his troops. So look at that. MashaAllah tabarakallah. Okay. We'll pause there. We have learned quite a lot. I mean, the defeat of Karin and Khorasan by Abdullah ibn Kazim as-Sulami and Ibn Amr appointed him as the governor of Khorasan later on. MashaAllah. Remember, we had the two brothers, Abdur Rahman ibn Rabi'a, and then we had Salman ibn Rabi'a. Remember? It's kind of sad that he lost his brother. And Abdur Rahman's body was placed in a cassock and remains in that area. And we learn words of Bab, Gilan, Gorgan. We learn about the Turks and the Byzantines, people of Merv. I mean, subhanAllah, it's like quite amazing. And remember, Abdur Rahman ibn Rabi'a was a commander in Bab. We heard some nice war poetry, which was excellent. And then remember the guy he promised to spare, Sayyid ibn al-As, and his invasion of Tabaristan. So he set out with some troops to Kufa, headed for Khorasan. And he was accompanied by Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman and some other companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Al-Hasan and Hussein were there. We have Abdullah ibn Abbas. We got Abdullah ibn Zubair, Abdullah ibn Umar, and Abdullah ibn Amir ibn al-As. And subhanAllah, he spared. They went to Tamisa, and Tamisa is part of Tabaristan, Gorgan, and it's a city on the coast, right? On the coast by the borders of Gorgan. They're fighting, doing the prayer of peril, and then Sayyid struck a man, just sliced and diced, prosciutto style. Came up from the elbow, pretty brutal. Laid siege, and then he told them, you know, I'm not gonna kill any man from among you, so open up this fortress. They let him in. He murked everybody except for that one guy. And then when Said returned to Kufa, Ka'b ibn Juhail praised him with this really cool little poem he saw. So it's like battle poetry. It's really cool, man. You never know what's coming. And what's great about this text is that we're learning lots of names here. And we have such a rich history, our religion. And it's important for us to look at the past and see what did they learn. And there's tons of things in here for leadership. I think it's very important. So for the men who want to be leaders of the Ummah, don't look to schmucks like Andrew Tate and Sneeko. Well, Sneeko, may Allah guide him, he's doing good. But what I mean by is like pimps like Tate, may Allah guide Tate back to the straight path of Islam. But if you see their behaviors, that's what we need to look at. How they did it, you know. Because, remember, war is physical, but also psychological. And you can just see how their bravery and courage is just remarkable. And how they care about keeping the Muslims safe, good, and fortified. And restoring the honor, right? And being conscious of such things. Take care. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you'd like to support my work and read more about what I write, you can do so by going to my blog, which is www.subscribestar.com/Milahan. I'll see you there.